And this inheritance tax hike on farmers, how's it going to impact you?
Well, it's terrible news, to be honest, because without sounding flippant, £1 million of farmland these days, it's 100 acres. You can't. People who have 100 acres have a full-time job. So anything over that, the add on 20%, and also we forget the capital gains tax as well on top of that, as well as high interest rates to borrow against that. It's unviable. It's not possible. I mean, I'm a seventh generation farmer on this farm I'm at. We've been here since 1703, and we hand it down. It's what we do. We're not sitting on this huge asset to be able to then sell it to live the life of Riley. We're doing this to produce food that keeps you alive. I mean, I don't know how hard that is to understand for people in Westminster, but we're producing something that we don't have to be rely on from another country. We're doing it ourselves. I mean, we learned from the energy crisis, don't rely on other countries to supply necessities to keep us going. And this is food we're talking about. People need us. I mean, it's the same old story, and I hate repeating it. You know, it's, oh, you need farmer 3 times a day. Well, it's true. Nobody needs anybody more in the UK than we need a farmer. Like, I don't know how hard it is for people to commute that. I mean, are they making these decisions while they're sitting, tucking into their porridge in the morning or the sandwiches for lunch? I don't understand. They're killing the hand that feeds them, literally.
The NFU says it's the National Farmers Union says it's going to organise a big protest in London. Is that something you'd take part in?
Oh, 100%. I mean, this is like, we can't fathom how close this is to D-Day for agriculture. This is monumental, and I'm absolutely amazed. This shows how big this is. That all the crises we've gone through, the National Farmers Unions have never really spoken up. They don't like. But the fact that they have already organised a march in London just shows you how monumental this is. I mean, it's terrible. You look at the suicide figures in agriculture with mental health. They are staggering. Now, there was a report of a farmer who had taken his own life before the budget was released because of the hysteria and the noise that came out about the potential it might happen to his family farm. I mean, it is a very, very lonely place to work. You know, I have a young son, and my wife last weekend said that on the Saturday, that's the first time I spent breakfast and lunch with him since the 1st of November when he was born.
Wow.
When the Labour Party talk about protecting working people and not taxing working people, how does that make you feel when you're describing that you haven't seen your son in that long? I mean, you can't imagine a more harder working person than a farmer, surely.
The classification of how people are in society these days, everything else has moved on in life. Why has that not moved on? The working man way back in the day when classes were set up was the coal miners. Nowadays, everybody's a working person because everybody has to provide because the margins are so tight. You know, electricians, sparkies, plumbers, ourselves, you know, I'm missing heaps of industries out there, but everybody's a working person. I mean, why can't we push prosperity? Why is it such a negative thing to want to be able to get up in the morning, work hard, earn a lot of money, support your family? Why is it a better option to just sit at home and just take the benefits and plead poverty when we're all sitting with our way of life these days with subscriptions to this and iPhones? Why is it such a negative to want to do well and have wealth?
Oh, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. What impact would this have on the UK if, it's a big if, but if as a result of all of this, we ended up of a nation of tenant farmers?
Tenant farmers, but tenants to who? Tenants to the state.
It would be big business, wouldn't it? It'd be big business moving in.
Well, if the way that the state runs things, as we see with the NHS and everything else, it would be a disaster. It would be a complete and utter disaster. They're not practically minded. They're not business minded. The country is a business. The country has to be run as a business. End of story. And if farming became state-owned, who gives them the right to be state-owned? Imagine someone came to you and said the state's going to own your house and you will have to abide by their rules. There would be anarchy, but because there's a fewer of us these days, because farms are getting bigger, because the margins are tighter, so you have to grow, less people on the farms, you've got greater reliance on equipment, our vote doesn't count anymore. So we're an easy target. Back in the day, there used to be a lot of people involved with agriculture. But nowadays, there's not so many. So we don't care. But we offer a huge amount to the economy. And that's something they want to control. You go back to the protests in Holland, remember, about a year ago? And what the Dutch government were trying to do was they couldn't physically take farms off of farmers. What they did is they introduced policies to reduce their nitrogen use for growing crops by 90%. Now, if you reduce your growing crops by 90% of nitrogen, you won't get a crop. Therefore, guess what happens? Farmer can't make repayments on the land. Who comes in behind and picks it up? The government. OK,
leaving that there because we are joined by the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones. Minister, good to see you this morning, as always. We've got to kick off, haven't we, with farmers in all of this, our inbox going mad. What is the government trying to do to farmers, people who are the protectors of our country, who are supplying our food chain?
Well, good morning. The first thing to say about the agricultural property relief is that in the past, where farmers would be able to pass down their whole estate tax-free to their children, would cost the Exchequer about £1 billion a year. Over half of that just went to 63 estates in the country with an average value of about £8 million. The new scheme that we've designed still gives you the first £1 million tax-free. And then for value over that, you get a 50% cut in the headline rate of inheritance tax at 20%. But really importantly, if you're a small farm holder and you live on the farm, in the kind of farmhouse, you benefit from the normal inheritance tax rights for passing down your primary residence, your family home. So for a married couple who pass down their house and the land to their children, they still get £2 million exempt from inheritance tax altogether, which does cover the vast majority of small and medium farms.
Have you actually considered the consequences of this, though? Because lots of commentary in the papers today saying that Labour doesn't understand rural communities. Most of us know that farmers are asset rich and cash poor. They will have to sell land in order to pay this tax. I'll put it to you what a farmer said to us earlier, which is, why are you biting off the hand of someone that feeds you, literally?
So this is about inheritance tax. So it's a tax you pay when the owner of the asset dies and passes it often to their children. And in the future, you can actually today I should say, you can buy insurance products to buy the risk of your inheritance tax liability in the future. So we've set what we think is a proportional system here. As I say, £1 million tax-free, or £2 million if it's the family home, and then a 50% cut on the tax rate at 20% thereafter. You can actually buy insurance products now to buy out the risk of those payments in the future. And in the context where we're protecting working people, we have to make decisions in other areas of tax.
Forgive me, but you can't really sit there and say to deal with this issue, which is upsetting an awful lot of people in this country, that you can't then peddle an insurance policy. I mean, for those of us who actually have looked at these sort of insurance policies, they cost an absolute fortune.
They don't. I don't know if you looked at inheritance tax insurance policies for agricultural policy relief since the budget 2 days ago. I doubt that you have, with respect. But look, if you buy this now for your children as they're growing up, it's not a huge expense. But look, you have to recognise that when you make a tax change, the people that have to pay tax are never very happy about that. I get it. But we made an election commitment to protect working people. We didn't increase the headline rates of income tax or national insurance that people pay in their pay slips. We didn't increase VAT, which is what people pay in the shops, and disproportionately affects people on the lowest incomes. And we made a commitment to business not to cut corporation tax, the tax they pay on their business profits, not just now, but for the whole of this Parliament. But we inherited public finances in a mess. We had to make some tax decisions to do that. And that's why, in honouring those commitments to protect working people, we've had to look to other areas.
Forgive me, but in the run-up to the election, you said you were sticking to your sort of costed plans, if you like, and you had no plans to to increase rates of tax on a whole host of areas. That's been blown out the water by this £40 billion tax hike. It may be sticking to the word of saying, well, it's no direct taxes on working people. It's still working people that are going to have to face the consequences of everything that you've done.
Well, firstly, you don't need to ask for forgiveness for asking me questions. I'm very happy to be here to answer them. I mean, look, the manifesto commitments was about the things that we were going to do differently, the new things we were going to do on top of what we inherited. All of that was fully funded and fully costed with the tax changes that were in our manifesto on wealthy non-DOMs, on private equity, on VAT on private school fees, on windfall taxes for oil and gas companies. All of those things have been honoured in this budget, and all of them pay for the new things that we said we would do for our first steps. But we inherited public finances out of control. Nobody knew that. Only Conservative ministers knew that. That's been confirmed by the Office of Budget Responsibility and by the Institute for Fiscal Studies. But now with a government, you can't just moan about it. You've got to deal with it. And that's why we've had to get a grip of public finances in the way that we have in this budget.
You failed on your mission, though, haven't you? This was meant to be a budget of growth. The Chancellor was proudly talking about wanting to be a Chancellor of growth, wanting Britain to burn bright. But the OBR outlook is grim, isn't it? No real growth for the next 5 years, anaemic at best. The IFS out this morning saying because of that lack of growth, Rachel Reeves would be forced to raise taxes again in just 2 years' time. We know that the markets are jittery, the pound is down. The outlook is bleak, isn't it?
No, and there are two separate things there. On growth is back into the British economy. That's in the OBR forecasts. It's about 2%, it comes down a bit and then it goes up again. That is far greater than what we've had in the last few years, where it's been 0.1 or 0.2. Well, compared to 0.1, it is important progress. Do we want more? Absolutely we do, but we're just getting started. This is our first budget. And then to the second point of your question about this £9 billion figure the IFS have put out today, that assumes that we make no progress whatsoever in improving the performance of our public services. I just don't accept that assumption. All of our public services that are now getting investment as a consequence of this budget have to reform, have to modernise, have to improve how we deliver services. As a government, we're absolutely committed to that, and that's how you get through on a sustainable path of public finances. You can't just keep taxing and spending for broken systems.
All right, admittedly, though, a lot of people are going to feel this, and a lot of people are very angry, and that has to be accepted, if you agree with their position or not. How are they going to feel that you've appointed a value-for-money czar who's going to earn £50,000 a year for working 12 days a year? How is that right?
I'm not sure those numbers are true. I mean, the external expert we've appointed to the Office of Value for Money gets a...
I mean, it's expected to work. It's expected to work 1 day a month for £950 a day. And
yes, and there's 12 months in the year, so that's about £12,000.
Yes, but it works out, doesn't it? If he was working 5 days a week, that'd be 240 grand.
Yeah, but he's not working 5 days a week, is he? He's working 1 day a month.
Well, what's he going to do in 1 day a month?
But the point is, I mean, we can go around the numbers, but, well, he's an external independent expert. Office of Value for Money is a group of civil servants who are currently employed looking at areas of public spending that we've inherited from the Conservatives where it's basically gotten out of control. There are whole areas in terms of how you deliver major projects or infrastructure, the use of hotels for the asylum system, the SEND system, the system for looked after children. There's a whole list of areas of public services that we've got to get a grip on and reform over the years ahead. And the Office of Value for Money is a hit squad that's going to come in and advise on how we can do that better within Whitehall, within government departments. It's right that we have an expert, independent chair of that group, but the day-to-day work will be done by ministers like me and by our officials.
Yeah, sorry, Ellie, for jumping in. I should just point out that is absolutely my mistake. He's working 1 day a week. That's my mistake, misreading my screen. But you should have known that.
Well, I should know a lot of things, and I think I've done quite well in this interview, but I think we've got to point of clarification there. The fact is he's not working 5 days a week, as you've suggested, and I think it is good value for money that we have challenge in the system.
Minister, we're almost out of time with you. Just wanted to ask, we now know that the National Farmers Union going on strike the 19th of September. There's going to be a rally in London. Farmers threatening to strike up and down the country. Fears of food shortages. How concerned are you?
Well, look, as I said, I've explained the approach we've taken to the agricultural property relief, which I think is the issue that the National Farmers Union and others are anxious about. It's designed in a way to protect small and medium farms, to protect family farms where the families live on those farms. And in the context we find ourselves in, we think that's a reasonable thing to do. But as I say, people, when they're asked to pay a bit more tax, are never happy about it. But I'm afraid we have to balance the public finances and we have to protect working people, which is what we promised in our manifesto.
Minister, we appreciate you coming on for a robust interview. Do pass it round your colleagues that they're always very welcome to fight their corner. Thanks very much indeed.